So thank you for coming today and listening to our class on the 6 steps to legacy planning for generations. It's my privilege as the owner and founder of Canella Financial Group to present this class to you. I always enjoy presenting classes to help improve financial literacy and help improve people's financial lives in general. So today's topic is going to be a little bit different than you might think of for relevant, just general kind of the old stuffy estate planning. We hope to make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more interactive. So we're going to start off. With a little picture of two different people. I'm sure most of you can recognize at least one of these people. But the one on the right, so that's James Gavindoli, right, from The Sopranos. But the person on the left, he's actually famous for delivering a talk that was based on this actual question. So the question was, what wisdom would you try to impart to the world if you knew it was your last chance? So a pretty stellar question, right? For most of us, if we kind of thought about that, how would we actually answer that question? So this gentleman that was on the left, his name is Randy Pausch, and it was called The Last Lecture. He's actually he was a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon University, so something pretty close to home. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at the age of 45. He delivered what was called his last lecture that became a YouTube sensation, and it was actually made into a book after that. He appeared on various talk shows, so he became very famous for that talk. Unfortunately, he did pass away at the age of 47 after his fight with that pancreatic cancer. So what he did during this lecture was actually talk about his life, talked about the things he thought about. So some of the quotes that are from his book, one of them says, the key question to keep answering or to keep asking is, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all you have. A second quote came from the book. It says, be prepared. Luck is truly where preparation meets opportunity. And then a third quote in the book says, to be cliche, death is part of life, and it's going to happen to all of us. However, in his case, he said, I have the blessing of getting a little bit of advance notice, and I'm able to optimize my use of time down the home stretch. So he really, did take that to heart as far as him having time, but it, kind of really shows his human resilience in the face of this personal tragedy. He knew that his time was limited, and he wanted to make the most of it for himself as well as for his family. So part of today's class is we're going to talk about that as far as how do you do that relevant to really not knowing, how much time we actually have left on Earth is. As compared to the famous actor, James Gandolfini, the last scene, if you remember the last scene from The Sopranos, he basically, you can see that he died unexpectedly at age 51. He died on a trip that he was on going to Italy. However, he left only 20% of his estate to his wife, and about $30 million of that estate went to pay taxes. So pretty unfortunate that he didn't do very good estate planning, not only financially, but also, relevant to his family and putting things in order, because he did die, fairly young at an unexpected age and pretty quickly. So unlike Randy, he didn't have the time to do that. He didn't have time to write that final scene in his life. But again, it's kind of going back to that final scene in The Sopranos. It's where Tony and his family, he arranges a time for them to all sit down at the restaurant. They all come and they're sitting there, except for his daughter. She's not there yet. But the camera kind of pans back and forth between them being inside the restaurant and his daughter Meadow being outside of the restaurant. And the last thing that you see in that last show is actually a blank screen. So kind of like the show ended, his life ended somewhat similar, where you really know, you don't know what the final ending of that show is. And, he really didn't have a chance to, have any final words with his family, didn't have any chance to sit down and write what he might want things to look like upon his passing. So again, we're going to get into the class and talk about some of these different aspects as far as legacy planning. And people, often ask me, well, why are you presenting a class on estate planning? Wouldn't that be something that an attorney might present, versus yourself? But, I've been in a situation where I've seen people go through these scenarios. Sometimes where things weren't really planned out very well. Their children weren't really ready to inherit some of their assets, and things didn't really work out as the way, they probably thought it should have worked out, when they were alive. So I'm pretty excited to talk about our topic tonight, legacy planning. So it's not, that stuffy old version of the traditional estate planning. Instead, we're going to talk about, what it makes, does it make sense to write down things for your family, the people that you love that, that are going to be left behind, so that they really know how you felt about them, how you felt about life in general, kind of passing on some of your wisdom in that regard. So unfortunately, this is a poll that was taken, and it shows that 55% of adults actually do not have a will. So 44% reported that they have a will, 55% don't have a will. So that number is actually down from 51% that reported having a will in 2005. So typically older Americans are more likely to have a will. They've kind of come to that realization, obviously, that they're getting closer to the end of life versus being at the beginning or even in the middle. So again, one of the steps that we'll talk about, some of these documentations that are important, relevant to having. But what happens if I die with no will or any trust? So if I die without a will or without a trust, it's considered to be dying intestate. So in that regard, let's say you get hit by that proverbial bus before you had a chance to write down everything that you wanted. So there's no official documentation, there's no direction or guide for your family. So family members can disagree about your wishes. The estate can go into probate. It can cost additional monies to have things settled. And there's no final message to your family members which can be, you know, one of the most important things, kind of letting them know how you feel. So, you know, whether these documents are missing or incomplete, they might even be in conflict with one another as far as what you thought was going to happen. So again, we're going to talk about these factors and hopefully get people on track so that they are doing things correctly. So, you know, not having a will, not having beneficiary designations can all cause problems. And so what happens is, again, you're dying intestate. So the court takes over your situation. They divide assets based upon state law. So it's not divided necessarily the way you want. And you would be surprised that state law doesn't necessarily going to give everything to your spouse if you are married. So, you know, at the end, you know, the impact can be pretty bad and things that you don't want to see happen. So we are going to talk about that generational planning. It's more modern. It's kind of two-phased aspect. So it kind of, you know, put some fun into this as well. Even though most of us don't really want to think about our own demise, but at some point, again, that's something that we're all going to go through. So to get started with some of the documentation that you would think about or want to have in place, you know, especially in this case, you know, even worse than death would be if you became suddenly incapacitated, right? So let's say you suffered a stroke, you were hit or in a car accident, and you were in a coma. So, you know, without having these certain documentations in place, no one knows what your medical wishes are. No one is appointed to make those decisions for you, and no one has the authority to handle your finances. So your money could be frozen. No one could have access to your assets. No one would have any information about your situation or what your medical wishes are. So in this case, it's pretty important to have, you know, certain documents, and we'll cover those as we get into the class. So our definition of, you know, as far as estate planning, thinking of dying, you know, one of the greatest obstacles in estate planning is the perpetuating of death denial. Most people don't want to plan for post-death lives because death tends to be a scary topic, even thinking about it. You know, this was some information that was found, and, you know, most people really don't want to think about it. And I can remember in the past, even some of the older generations, they would not want to write a will because they thought if they wrote a will, that meant that they were going to die very shortly. So some of those old type scenarios, trying to eliminate those and be more proactive about various things. So again, if you don't have an estate plan, your heirs may be subject to a number of obstacles such as probate, creditors, lawsuits, judgments. Legal fees can be higher, relevant to having your estate go through the courts, which can compromise the value of your legacy, not necessarily just your financial assets, but also your intangible assets as well. So these are some common estate planning problems. You know, not having a will or a trust, overlooked provisions such as guardianship for minors, no tax planning. You know, what would it look like if you passed away? What would that tax situation look like for your heirs? Financial strain such as cash shortages for survivors. Is there cash on hand for them? Or is that something that you would need to put in place, such as life insurance for those people that are left behind, for the survivors? So, decisions aren't communicated to the next generation. Details are not revealed until after death. So that can be troublesome. It could cause family tensions. And then reluctance to make plans or update plans is really, really not a good picture for most family situations. So on the flip side of that, the benefits of estate planning are that, you can spell out your healthcare wishes. Most people probably don't want to spend 5 years or 3 years, hooked up to machines, just keeping them alive. Because the healthcare profession, their intention is to try to keep us alive as long as possible. Possessions go to your heirs. You choose without, any dispute. It avoids additional unplanned legal expenses, provides for loved ones not otherwise protected. So people that you want to provide for that might not necessarily be there, people, it could be maybe a niece or a nephew or just a friend that you wanted to help provide for. So all of that can happen with doing some basic and general estate planning documentation. But the big key factor in looking at estate planning from the traditional side is that what's missing is your intangible assets, right? So your character assets, your values, your health, spirituality, your heritage. Where did you come from? Where did your grandparents come from? What's your purpose? What were your life experiences? What kind of talents do you have? And plans for giving. Do you have any plans for giving as far as maybe being charitably inclined? Other factors such as your intellectual assets. If you had a business, what type of business systems did you have? What kind of alliances or friendships did you have? What are some of the different ideas that you maybe came up with over your lifetime? Different traditions, family traditions, some of the things that we do during holidays. What are those traditions to pass those on to the next generation and even beyond that? What was your reputation? What kind of legacy do you want to leave relevant to those types of things, as well as wisdom? So, your life has been full of work and full of all the different things that you've done. Why would you want to not pass that wisdom on to that next generation? So whether it's children or grandchildren, trying to figure out how to pass that on. So it's more than just your balance sheet, right? It's more than just a bunch of numbers on a page. It's, kind of looking at yourself and what you want to leave as your legacy. So our definition of generational planning is a modern, intentional two-phase process that expands estate planning's reach and helps you plan your legacy. So again, kind of putting that fun into this so that you can plan that, so that you can pass on those experiences with the next generations. So two objectives when we look at this generational planning. The first objective is passing on a family's tangible wealth and assets, including their traditional estate planning. So doing that in the most efficient manner possible. And then the second objective would be to convey your family's values and history, your traditions, its legacy to the next generation, and even beyond that next generation, going down the line. So successful legacy planning, we think of it from looking at one generation to the next. So looking at it from, at some point, if you're married, one of you may pass away. What is going to happen to that, to the spouse that's left as a survivor? Do they have enough resources to live comfortably? Are they able to carry on and manage their finances alone? A lot of times I'll see that one spouse tends to be in control of the finances. They kind of take charge, and the other one doesn't really know a lot about the finances, and they have to all of a sudden be prepared to understand what's happening and to manage those finances in an appropriate manner. And then looking at the next generation, your children, are they prepared for an inheritance? Are they prepared for a large sum of money being handed to them unexpectedly? Do they understand, that it took you a lifetime to save those assets? It's probably the last thing that you want is for your children not to understand the importance of those assets, understand the ramifications of tax consequences, and should they invest that? Should they spend it? What types of things would you want your children to do with those assets that you are passing down to them? And then grandchildren and future generations, hopefully you can impart on them some of your wisdom, some of your experiences. And some people even tend to pass on assets to grandchildren as well. So not just leaving them to children, but also leaving them to grandchildren so that they can be in a good financial situation for their future as well. And then lastly, just the world in large, right? So people that institutions that you may have dealt with, do you want to, or you have any type of charitable intentions in that regard as well? So a lot of people believe that, it sounds like this is overwhelming and complicated, but it's our objective to try to help you build a plan so that it's not overwhelming and it's not complicated. So helping you to achieve the goals and objectives that you might have are relevant to doing this legacy and generational planning. So we have, again, this 6-step process to start leaving your mark for the next generation. So we're going to walk through the various steps of this planning and see, what does it entail. So part one, or the step one, is planning for incapacity. So we talked about incapacity, what that could mean, what that could look like, but how do we prepare for that? So we would prepare for that by using these two important documents. One is called an advance directive for healthcare, or a living will. So it provides direction as far as what your wishes are at the time of your incapacity. It also puts someone in charge. It gives them the authority to make decisions relevant to your health care. The second document is what's called a power of attorney. So this power of attorney is primarily for your finances. It gives another person the legal authority to act on your behalf. So, someone could make deposits for you. They could pay your bills. They could make financial investment decisions. So all of those factors need to be, have a power of attorney if you were to be incapacitated. So for most people, normally they're going to name each other or their spouse as a power of attorney. But if you're not married or you don't have a spouse currently, you would want to think of, well, who would take care of your situation the way you would want to have it taken care of if you were able to do it yourself. Okay. So as well as these documents, not only giving that power to just one person, but also having a contingency. So, I have a contingency plan that, let's say my wife is my power of attorney, but if she's not able to act as well, then maybe I have a contingency that my son is going to be the power of attorney if my wife can't do that for me. So, all of these documents are pretty important. That's why we talk about them. So part 2 is getting organized. So getting organized entails really sitting down and, taking a look at, where is everything at? Identify properties so that you know how you might want to divide it up amongst the different beneficiaries. Determine if your estate will be subject to any kind of estate taxes, whether it's federal estate taxes or state estate taxes. So in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania charges an estate tax on even $1 if you were to pass away. So you want to make it easy for your spouse and your children, give them access to important things like your important papers and passwords to log into your various types of accounts. Help them know what to do first, right? What should they do first if you have pets or mail? Provide special instructions and explanations for your decisions, right? So really getting organized, knowing where people can find things, not just, if something were to happen to you, if they opened up a drawer and there was a pile of papers in there, would they understand them the way that you understand them as well? So looking at these other factors as far as even social media sites. Let's say I have a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page. Can I give someone access to that to potentially turn that off, right? If I passed away, I don't want my Facebook page to be out there indefinitely. I would want someone to ultimately shut that off, right? So part 3, think about the people you love and the causes you care about. What do you want to have happen in that regard with regard to those people? So consider contingencies and special circumstances. I talked about having those contingent power of attorney or contingent healthcare directive person that would be in charge of those things. So, if a spouse were to die first, you have those contingencies built in. Are you going to divide things equally amongst your children? Or, maybe you're going to give certain things to children that, maybe you already gave things to other children that you didn't give to children that you have, and you want to maybe equalize that or maybe not equalize that, right? So what about grandchildren and other relatives or friends? Do you want to give anything to them? Do you want to have children, you don't feel ready to handle an inheritance? Do you have any children such as that? Then you might want to create contingencies for that or set up a trust for a child that you feel might not handle that inheritance properly. Do you need to provide for special circumstances such as a special needs trust for a child that might have some disabilities? So prepare your beneficiaries for their inheritance. This is the time to talk to your spouse and to your children. So how do we do that? We'll show you that relevant to some of the workbooks that we have, some of the documentation that you can provide and put together, relevant to showing your beneficiaries, kind of a step-by-step. This is the process that I have put together for you to look at upon my death. Step 4 would be to work with financial professionals to put your wishes in writing, right? So people that you might work with, people like an attorney, people like your CPA, an accountant, and then your financial advisor. So kind of looking at financial professionals to put these wishes in writing. Okay. So a will, isn't always the way to pass on assets. So some assets can be transferred through titling. If I own assets jointly with my spouse or with someone else, those joint assets are going to automatically go to the other joint owner because of the titling. Um, so most retirement type assets have beneficiary designations, or you might want to use a trust to transfer assets. So, but all of this needs to be coordinated relevant to, let's say I have a will that says one thing, but my beneficiary designation say something else. So how does that conflict work and how does that get resolved? So some estates are simple, some estates are more complicated, but it's really best to work with an attorney to make sure that you have the proper documentation. So attorneys can make you aware of the possibilities and the contingencies, you might not be thinking about. You can come to them with all the different ideas that you have about estate planning. What do you want to see happen? And they can tell you, yes, that's possible, or no, that's really not possible, and it's probably going to create more of a problem than a benefit for your beneficiaries by setting up things in that particular manner. So, an attorney can help you determine, do you need a trust, or is that really too complicated, too complex for your situation? So part 5 is creating that family legacy, really kind of sitting down and looking at, what do you want to pass on as far as these intangible type assets. So, leaving behind a piece of yourself and making your life count. So things like writing down memories, putting together scrapbooks and photo albums, um, compiling favorite recipes, passing recipes down from one generation to the next so that those don't get lost. Teaching someone a special skill such as gardening or woodworking, um, painting, whatever that special skill or hobby is that you have, possibly passing that on to the next generation or to grandchildren, right? Grandchildren are great because they'll listen, to their grandparents, or they want to absorb more and more information. They're like a sponge, right? They want to gather as much information about you as they can. So really thinking about these intangible assets and how do you put those together? So again, making sure that you're writing things down so that they don't get lost. What did you do with your parents, or what did you do with your grandparents? So, letting your children and your grandchildren know that if you have that history, looking back that far. And then step 6 is to really monitor and update your plan as time goes on. So we know things change, right? Um, so some people get married, some people might be getting divorced. So what are those factors that change? You want to keep that in mind. You don't want the wrong people to inherit your assets relevant to that. I've seen situations where, people got divorced, maybe they got remarried, but they never changed the beneficiary designation on, let's say, an old 401k plan that they had, or they didn't change it on an IRA that they had, or some other type of investment they may have that they really didn't think about for a long time. So those beneficiary designations would entitle that person that's listed on there to receive that asset. So we invite people to, let us work with you, let us help with you, kind of review things briefly. And, we can start by looking at the differences between the two families that we first started looking at, right? We looked at Randy Pausch and James Gandolfini. right? So the differences between their lives and what they were able to do. So just make sure that you're controlling your final narrative relevant to the way you want things to look at, right? Because we saw the consequences of not really being prepared. The concepts of intestacy, dying without a will, versus the concept of generational planning, and how that really differs. So again, taking the overwhelming and the complexity out of it, kind of working together to develop a plan. Maybe similar to like maybe some of you I've developed a financial plan for, or we've worked together to develop that long-term plan for that. That didn't happen overnight. It takes time to develop that. So, we set up, kind of look at what your goals are relevant to that, kind of look at setting up a time frame relevant to accomplishing the various aspects of the estate planning. So, looking at, doing the documentation, the healthcare directives, the power of attorney, potentially creating a will, creating the beneficiary designations, making a list of all the various accounts that you have, making a list of the different passwords, gathering important papers. So, a lot of you may have access to resources that do compile that for you. So you could provide that information to your beneficiaries or to, a child or a spouse so that they understand where everything is at as well. So the other factors are, sharing resources. So we have, a large pool of resources that we work with various estate planning attorneys. We work with tax advisors, as well as if you have your own estate planning attorney or your own tax advisors, we can sit down with them and help to coordinate this plan that you want to put in process. Because a lot of, especially tax advisors or CPAs, they're generally used to just looking at the numbers. Estate planning attorneys are generally, used to just preparing documents relevant to looking at the legal side of the disbursement of assets. And then, we kind of come into place and, kind of look at those intangible assets. How do you pass those on to the next generation? And then by working together, we can hold each other accountable. We can frequently check in to see if, are you on track to meeting the various goals and objectives that you set? Did you do that meeting with the attorney? Did you create the will and the power of attorney? All of those factors. And not only just creating the power of attorney, but did you give it to people that would need that in the event of your incapacity, right? So, not just doing the documentation. I've seen people that have prepared trust and put a trust together, but they never fund the trust or never title anything into the trust. So, for some purposes, that trust really becomes ineffective if it's really not used properly. So just kind of working together, making sure that things are set up properly the way you want them to finally look. So, we do ask people that attend the class or people that are clients, you can request a legacy planning assessment. We can sit down with you and see, what have you done so far? Where are you at? We have workbooks and, different documents to help you put together and organize your situation the way that you may want it to look as well. So just imagine how you might feel when all of that's done, right? Your legacy is all set. You've completed all the documentation. You have records and papers put together. so that you can pass those on to the next generation, as well as you've talked to the next generation. They understand your wishes. They understand how you feel about things. So hopefully, that they can carry on that legacy. They can carry on your values, your family traditions. Uh, you'll be remembered for all the unique contributions to the world that you were able to provide. Okay. So, legacy planning, it's not really as hard as you may have thought, right? We went through a lot of things this evening. We went through a lot of information, but it's, really just sitting down and getting started, right? Just like anything else. If I was going to, let's say I wanted to lose 10 pounds, I'm probably not going to lose 10 pounds overnight. But if I wanted to lose 10 pounds, I'd have to start an exercise regimen, or I'd have to start a plan where I was going to eat properly. All of those aspects, they're not necessarily hard. It's just a matter of getting started, right? So again, we encourage you to start with a free legacy planning assessment where we could sit down, take a look at where you're at, take a look at where you want to go relevant to that. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the session. And as I said, I told you that I would open up the session after the class. I'll stop the recording and we can certainly open the session up for questions and answers.